My name is Gerald Marsh, and I was 63 years old the morning my parents drove away from Terminal C of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport and left me standing on the curb with one carry-on bag and $47 in my wallet. The August heat came up off the pavement in visible waves. The automatic doors behind me kept opening and closing for other people. I stood there long enough to watch their car. My father's silver Buick LeSabre with a cracked left taillight I had paid to fix twice disappear into the departures lane traffic. I did not chase it. I did not call out. My throat tightened once, and then something in me went very still. Because here is what neither of them knew. I had been preparing for that exact moment for 11 months. Welcome back to Channel, where quiet patience always outlasts loud cruelty. If you've ever given everything to people who treated your loyalty as something they were owed, this story is for you. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. Gerald Marsh. That was still my name, even after everything. I was born in Decatur, Georgia, in 1960, the second of 3 children in a house on Fenwick Road that my father, Howard Marsh, had purchased in 1957 with a veteran's loan he talked about at every family dinner for the next 30 years. My mother, Ruth Marsh, kept that house the way some people keep a performance. Every surface dusted, every throw pillow squared. Every visitor met the door with a smile that communicated nothing about what happened after they left. My older brother Dennis was the first in the family to finish college, first to buy his own home, first to have children, first to be introduced at every gathering. My younger sister Patricia was the last, which made her the one who was still being protected long after she needed it. That left me, Gerald, in the middle, not first, not last, present. I graduated from Georgia State University in May of 1983 with a degree in accounting. I went to work for Callaway Financial Services on Peachtree Street in E that same summer, starting as a junior auditor at 22 and staying for 31 years. By 2001, I was a senior partner. By 2009, I was managing a client portfolio worth a combined $42 million in annual filings. None of that was ever mentioned at Thanksgiving. My wife, Carolyn Marsh, née Whitfield, was the person who noticed it first. We had married in June of 1987 in a ceremony at Druid Hills Baptist Church that my mother planned and my father paid for, and that neither of them ever let us forget. Carol saw the pattern within the first 2 years. She would squeeze my hand under the table when my mother talked about Dennis's bonus. She would find my eyes across the room when my father redirected a conversation about my work back to Patricia's new apartment. She never made me feel small for coming from people who did. She just kept her hand in mine. Carol died on February 14th, 2019, a date that has never stopped feeling like a specific kind of cruelty, from a pulmonary embolism that her doctor, Dr. Miriam Okafor, a hematologist at Emory University Hospital, had been monitoring since December of 2018. She was 58 years old. Dr. Okafor called me at 6:17 a.m. on a Thursday morning and told me Carol had coded at 5:49 a.m. and that every effort had been made. I sat on the edge of our bed on Arbor Glen Drive in Decatur and looked at Carol's reading glasses on her nightstand and said nothing for a very long time. The sealed envelope was in the top drawer of Carol's desk in our study. She had put it there herself in October of 2018, after her first serious episode. I knew it was there. I had not opened it. It had her handwriting on the front, just my name, Gerald, in the blue ink she always used, and I had made a decision on the day she placed it there that I would not open it until I absolutely had to. I did not know then that it would become the center of everything that came after. My parents' relationship with me after Carol's death was not unkind at first, or perhaps it was, and I had simply grown too accustomed to the temperature of it to notice. My father called once a week for the first 3 months, on Sunday afternoons between 2 and 2:30. The calls lasted approximately 9 minutes. He asked how I was eating. He told me what Dennis was doing. He asked if I needed anything, and when I said no, which I always did because I had always said no, he said good, that was good, and told me to take care of myself. My mother came to the house on Arbor Glen Drive twice in the first year after Carol's passing. The first visit was in March of 2019, when she reorganized my kitchen cabinets without asking and told me that Carol had never kept the spices in the right order. The second visit was in September that year, when she sat in the living room and told me that I had been living alone for 7 months now and that it might be time to think about selling the house and moving somewhere smaller. "It's too much house for one person," she said. The afternoon light came to the front window at a low angle and fell across the armchair where Carol used to read. "You're rattling around in here." I said nothing. "Dennis has that investment property in Marietta," she said. "He could help you look at something more practical." I looked at the armchair. I said, "I'll think about it." I never thought about it. The house on Arbor Glen Drive had been mine and Carol's for 22 years. I had repainted every room at least once. I had replaced the roof in 2014, paying the full invoice of $11,400 on a Tuesday morning in April without financing. I had driven Carol to her cardiologist appointments at Emory every third Thursday for 14 months. I had learned which parking structure had the closest elevator. I had memorized the route from the third-floor oncology waiting room to the hospital chapel because she liked to sit there for 15 minutes before every appointment, and I wanted to be able to find her without making her feel watched. I was not going to sell the house. What my parents did not yet understand, what they had perhaps never understood in 63 years, was that I had built something, quietly, steadily, without announcing it. 31 years at Callaway Financial. A partner's draw that had compounded without interruption since 1997. A private investment account that Carol and I had opened together in 2003 with a financial advisor named Bernard Holt at Cornerstone Wealth Management on Claremont Road, which by February of 2020 held just under $1.4 million. I had never mentioned that account to anyone in my family. It was not relevant to any conversation we had ever had. The envelope in Carol's desk was still sealed. I checked it every few months, not to open it, but to confirm it was still there. It was always there. Her handwriting never changed. Gerald, blue ink, October 2018. The shift happened in the spring of 2021. I had retired from Callaway Financial in December of 2020 at 60 years old, with a full partner settlement and a letter of commendation from the firm's managing director, Peter Aldis, that I kept in a folder in my filing cabinet and never showed anyone. My parents had not attended the retirement lunch. My mother had a hair appointment. My father said he did not like to drive in midtown traffic. What they did attend, in April 2021, was a family gathering at Dennis's house in Alpharetta, a Sunday afternoon cookout that my mother organized, and that was in the manner of all such gatherings in the Marsh family, designed to accomplish something specific under the cover of food and sunlight. Dennis's backyard smelled of charcoal and cut grass. The kids were running through the sprinklers at the far end of the yard. My father was at the grill, wearing the blue apron Dennis's wife Sandra had given him 2 Christmases ago. My mother was at the patio table with Sandra, and when I came to the gate she looked up and gave me the smile I had been seeing for 60 years. The one that meant she was glad I was there for reasons that had nothing to do with me. "Gerald," she said, "come sit." I sat. I accepted a glass of iced tea. "We've been meaning to talk to you," she said. My stomach dropped, not because of the words. She said things like that regularly, but because of the way Sandra looked away when she said it, as though she had already been told. "Your father and I are getting older," my mother said. "We've been doing some thinking about the house." The house. The house on Fenwick Road that my father had purchased in 1957. The house I had grown up in. The house I had paid to have re-roofed in 2011, $14,600, when my father said he couldn't manage it on his pension. The house I had arranged for and paid for a professional cleaning service to visit every 2 weeks since March of 2019 at a cost of $180 per visit because my mother's hip made it difficult for her to manage the stairs. "We've decided," my mother said, "that when the time comes, the house will go to Dennis." I looked at her. "He has the family," she said, "the grandchildren. It makes sense for the house to stay with someone who has roots here." I said nothing. I looked at the glass of iced tea in my hands. The ice had already started to melt. "You've always been independent," my father said from behind me at the grill. He said it the way people say things they've rehearsed. "You don't need it the way Dennis does." "That's not the only thing," my mother said. She folded her hands on the table. We'd like to revisit the arrangement with the cleaning service. Dennis thinks it might be more cost-effective to bring someone in once a month rather than every 2 weeks. Dennis thinks, I said. He's been very helpful in looking at our finances, she said. He has a good head for these things. Something in me went very quiet. Not the kind of quiet that precedes a storm. The other kind, the kind that follows a decision already made. I see, I said. We're not trying to hurt you, my mother said. You understand that, don't you? We love you. You've always been the capable one. You've never needed anything. I nodded once. I put the glass down. Over the following 3 months, the conversations escalated in the way that conversations do when one party has decided there is no longer anything to lose. My father called me and made it tell me that Dennis would be handling their taxes going forward, Dennis, who had a business degree and a good head for numbers, as opposed to me, who had spent 31 years as a senior partner at a financial firm, but had apparently not yet demonstrated sufficient competence in the area of family accounting. It just makes sense, my father said. He's closer. He can drop by. I said, that's fine, Dad. My stomach turned. I kept my voice flat. In June, my mother called to tell me that the upcoming family vacation to Savannah, an annual trip that Carol and I had participated in every year, without exception from 1994 until 2018, and that I had attended alone in 2019 and 2020, would be a smaller gathering this year. Just Dennis and his family, and Patricia, she said, just the ones with children. It would be easier to manage the rental property. You understand, she said. It's just logistics. I said, of course. My hands were cold. I sat at the kitchen table on Arbor Glen Drive for a long time after I hung up, looking at the window above the sink and listening to the neighborhood. A lawnmower 2 houses down. A dog somewhere on the next street. The refrigerator making the small hum it always made. My second named professional entered the picture in July of 2021. Her name was Diane Rourke, and she was an estate attorney at Rourke and selling her LLP on Ponce de Leon Avenue in Atlanta. Carol and I had worked with her once before, in 2016, when we had updated our joint will. I called her office on a Monday morning at 9:15 a.m. and made an appointment for the following Thursday. When I arrived, I brought the folder I kept in my filing cabinet, the one with the retirement commendation, and a second folder I had been assembling quietly since April. I sat down across from Diane Rourke, who was 61 years old and wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck, and I told her what I wanted to do. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she took off her glasses, set them on the desk, and said, Gerald, this is the most organized pre-action file I have seen in 22 years of practice. I said, I've had some time. She almost smiled. Let's get started. The July 4th holiday that year was the last family gathering I attended on the terms they had set. Sandra had made potato salad with too much mustard. Same as always. Dennis's youngest was afraid of the sparklers. My father sat in his lawn chair and talked about what Dennis was building out in the garage. My mother asked me at the table, in front of everyone, whether I thought about getting a pet. A cat, maybe, or a small dog. Because it wasn't healthy, she said, for a person my age to spend so much time alone. People start to get strange, she said, and she said it without cruelty, which was the worst kind of cruelty. You've been alone for 2 years now, Gerald. Carol would have wanted you to make an effort. Patricia looked at her salad. Dennis reached for the bread. My throat tightened. I let one breath out slowly. I looked at my mother and I said, I'm doing fine. She patted my hand. We worry about you, she said. That's all. I said nothing else for the rest of the meal. I drove home from Dennis's house that evening at 8:43 p.m. The windows were down. The Atlanta summer had broken slightly, the way it sometimes does in the evening in early July, and there was a smell of cooling pavement and someone's jasmine vine coming over a fence somewhere on Briarcliff Road. I drove the long way, down Ponce de Leon, past the old Sears building, past a stretch of road Carol, and I used to walk on Sunday mornings before her appointment started. I got home at 9:11 p.m. I turned on the kitchen light. I made a cup of coffee I did not drink. I sat at the table on Arbor Glen Drive, and I stayed there until well past midnight. And in those 3 hours, I made every decision I needed to make. I thought about what my father had said at the grill in April. You've always been independent. You don't need it the way Dennis does. I thought about what that sentence actually meant, not as a statement about me, but as a statement about them. They had looked at 63 years of a life built quietly and concluded that quiet meant empty, that independence meant absence, that because I had never stood in their kitchen with my hand out, I had no hand to extend. I thought about the roof in 2011. $14,600, paid in full, because my father called me on a Tuesday evening and said the estimate had come in and he didn't know how he was going to manage it. And I had said, without a pause, I'll handle it, Dad, and I had. I thought about the cleaning service. $180 every 2 weeks since March of 2019, a total, as of that July evening, of $11,340 over 26 months. I thought about the medical insurance supplement I had quietly arranged for both of them in 2017 through a broker named Carl Finney at Atlantic Benefits Group, which I had been paying the gap premium on every quarter without ever mentioning it. $812 per quarter. For years, $13,000. I thought about none of these things with anger. I want to be clear about that. My chest was very still. The coffee cooled in the cup. I was not constructing a case for grievance. I was simply accounting, which was a thing I had always done best, and which had apparently never impressed anyone enough to mention at a Sunday cookout in Alpharetta. And then I thought about the envelope. I went to Carol's desk at 11:30 p.m. The study smelled of old paper and the lavender sachet she had kept in the desk drawer since 2004. I sat in her chair. I turned on the small lamp. I put both hands flat on the desk surface for a moment, the way you do when you want to be certain you are ready. I was ready. I did not open it yet. That was not for tonight. Tonight was for deciding. Tomorrow, Thursday, July 8th, 2021, I would call Diane Rourke's office at 9 a.m. and tell her to proceed. I had everything I needed. The account statements from Bernard Holt at Cornerstone Wealth. Diane Rourke's preliminary framework. 31 years of documentation from Callaway Financial, filed in chronological order in 4 labeled binders on the shelf above the desk. The sealed envelope. I turned off the desk lamp. I went to bed. I slept, which surprised me slightly, and which told me something about the difference between a decision that costs you and a decision that finally costs nothing at all. On Thursday morning at 9:03 a.m., I called Diane Rourke's office and told her to proceed with the first phase. Her associate, a young man named Terrence Waite, confirmed the appointment for following Monday and told me to bring the financial summary I had prepared. I said I would. I also called Bernard Holt at Cornerstone Wealth at 9:41 a.m. and asked him to prepare a full account summary as of July 1st. He said he would have it by end of day. I continued to pay the cleaning service invoice for my parents' house on Fenwick Road that same week. $180. Direct transfer, same as always. I had decided I would keep paying it until the day the attorney told me the first document had been filed. Not a day longer. The fall of 2021 had a particular quality to it. My parents, having made their intentions clear in April and confirmed them the month since, proceeded the way people do when they believe the matter is settled, with a casual ease that read, to anyone watching closely, as total confidence. They had made their decision about the house on Fenwick Road. They had repositioned Dennis as a capable son. They had moved on. I was Gerald. Gerald was fine. Gerald was always fine. My mother called in August to tell me that Dennis had installed a new security system at the house on Fenwick Road. She described it in detail: motion sensors, a keypad, a camera above the front door. She said Dennis had paid for it. She said it gave them peace of mind. She did not ask whether I had any interest in having access to the new code. Dennis set up an app on his phone. She said, he can see the front door from anywhere. I said, that's good, Mom. My throat did not tighten. I had moved past that. In September, Dennis called me for the first time in 4 months. We spoke twice a year on average, once around Christmas, once when something logistical required a sibling conversation. This call was logistical. He wanted to discuss the arrangement for their parents' eventual estate in a direct way, now that, as he put it, Everyone's on the same page. I just want you to know, Dennis said, that I'm not trying to cut you out. This is what Mom and Dad want. You've always done your own thing. Patricia and I will make sure it's handled fairly. The late September light was coming through the study window, falling across Carol's desk. I sat in her chair, the way I had started doing when I worked in the evenings. I appreciate you saying that, I said. Mom worries about you, he said. We all do. You've been on your own a long time. 2.5 years, I said. Right, he said. It's a long time. I said, I'm all right, Dennis. He said, Good, good. That's good to hear. I said nothing further. I let the silence do what silence does. What Dennis did not know, what none of them knew, was that Diane Rourke had filed the first instrument on August 31st, 2021, at 10:15 a.m. at the Fulton County Courthouse. It was not aggressive. It was not dramatic. It was a single document, carefully prepared, that established a formal legal record of a financial matter that had existed for years but had never been given a name. Bernard Holt had delivered the full account summary in July. As promised, Diane had reviewed it. Terrence Wade had cross-referenced the payment history I had provided. On August 31st, the document was filed. I received confirmation at 10:47 a.m. I was on the back porch when the confirmation email arrived. The yard was doing what it always did in late August. The crepe myrtles losing their last flowers, the grass going dry and quiet, a cardinal and the fig tree Carol had planted in 2007 that I still pruned every spring. I read the email. I put the phone down. I watched the cardinal for a while. My parents flew to Florida in October for a 10-day visit with Patricia, who had moved to Clearwater the previous year. They called me from the airport to say they were heading out. My father said the weather had been good. My mother said Patricia's new apartment had a lovely view. We'll see you at Christmas, my mother said. Safe travels, I said. I called Diane Rourke at 9:22 a.m. the day after they left and told her to move to the second phase. By November, Howard Kessler, an asset documentation specialist at Kessler and Byrne LLC, whom Diane had brought in to verify the financial record, had completed his review and signed off on the formal calculation. He filed the supplemental record at the Fulton County Courthouse on November 4th at 2:09 p.m. I received that confirmation on my phone while I was in the grocery store on Scott Boulevard, standing in the cereal aisle. I put the phone back in my pocket. I bought the cereal I had come for. I drove home. The envelope was still in Carol's desk, still sealed, still November. Christmas arrived, and with a gathering at my parent house on Fenwick Road, the house with the new security system and the keypad code I had not been given. Dennis and Sandra brought the children. Patricia flew in from Clearwater. My father made a standing rib roast. My mother arranged the table the way she had arranged it for 50 years, with the good china that had been her mother's and the candles that were always white. I sat at the table. I ate the roast. I helped clear the plates. When Dennis said loudly to the table in general that he was thinking about converting the upstairs bedroom at Fenwick Road into a playroom for the grandkids, once the time comes, he said, with a smile at my parents, I looked at my plate. My father nodded. My mother looked pleased. Sandra started describing paint colors. I said nothing. I let that settle the way it needed to settle. That night, driving home on Briarcliff Road at 10:58 p.m., I made one last call. Not to Diane, not to Bernard. I called the cleaning service, Georgia Home Care, a woman named Yvette who had been managing the account since 2019, and I left a voicemail. Polite, clear. I told her to discontinue service at the Fenwick Road address as of January 1st, 2022. I thanked her for her work. I said I would send the final payment by the end of the week. I did. The trip to the airport happened in February of 2022. My parents had decided to fly to Savannah for a long weekend, a trip my father described as just the two of us, one last time before we get too old for that sort of thing. They needed a ride to Hartsfield-Jackson. Dennis was out of town. Patricia was in Clearwater. They called me on a Tuesday evening, and I said yes. Of course I said yes. I'd always said yes. I picked them up from Fenwick Road at 6:30 a.m. on a Saturday. My father had 2 large suitcases, a garment bag, and a carry-on. My mother had a rolling bag and a tote. The morning was cold and gray, the kind of Atlanta February morning that can't decide whether it be winter or not. I loaded everything into the trunk. My mother sat in the back. My father sat in the front. We drove. We were 20 minutes from the airport when my mother said, from the back seat, that she had spoken to an attorney, not Diane Rourke. She did not know about Diane Rourke. Her own attorney, a man named Philip Branch who handled their estate documents and had, she said, updated the will the previous month. We wanted you to hear it from us, she said, not from a letter. I kept my eyes on the road. The house will go to Dennis, she said. It's in writing now. We want you to understand that this isn't about not loving you. It's about what makes sense of the family. I said nothing. I changed lanes. Gerald, my father said, say something. I said, I heard you. We pulled to the curb at Terminal C at 7:44 a.m. I got out. I unloaded the suitcases onto the sidewalk. My father grabbed a garment bag. My mother straightened her coat. The automatic doors opened and closed behind us in the gray morning air. You know we love you, my mother said. She looked at me with the expression she had used my entire life, the one that meant the conversation was finished. I know, I said. She turned toward the doors. My father picked up his carry-on, and that is when my father said it, the words on the thumbnail that I have thought about every day since. He said them quietly, the way he said most things, without particular force, as though they were simply true. You've been nothing but a burden, Gerald. Find your own way home. He did not look back. I stood on the curb and watched them go through the doors. My carry-on bag was at my feet. $47 in my wallet. 83 degrees of humidity already building in the February air. I stood there for approximately 45 seconds. My hands were completely still. My chest was very still. I picked up my bag. I went back inside. I walked to the Delta Sky Club on the Beat Concourse. I had been a member since 2004, and I sat down at a table by the window. I ordered coffee. I took the envelope out of my carry-on bag. Carol's handwriting. Gerald, blue ink. October 2018. I opened it. Inside was a single folded page in Carol's hand, and beneath it, a smaller sealed envelope from Cornerstone Wealth Management addressed to both of us, dated September 14th, 2018. Carol's letter was 2 paragraphs. She had known, in the autumn of 2018, what the doctors were not yet saying directly. She wrote with the calm she had always had, the steady, sensible calm that had kept me upright for 31 years. She said she had made one addition to the Cornerstone account in September of 2018, an addition we had not discussed because she had wanted it to be, as she wrote, something that is only yours. She told me to read the enclosed statement. She told me she loved me. She told me to stop being so quiet about what I was worth. I sat with that for a while. Then I opened the Cornerstone envelope. The account, our joint account, which had passed fully to me upon her death, had been modified by Carol in September 2018 to include a secondary trust instrument, a document that Diane Rourke, when I had eventually brought it to her in July of 2021, had immediately recognized as the cleanest piece of pre-planning she had seen in years. The trust named me as sole administrator. It named the assets I had spent 31 years accumulating. And it named, explicitly, 3 ongoing financial contributions made to benefit of Howard and Ruth Marsh of Fenwick Road, Decatur, Georgia, the roof, the cleaning service, the insurance supplement, as documented gifts from Gerald Marsh, the record of which had been formally filed with the Fulton County Courthouse on August 31st, 2021, and supplemented on November 4th, 2021. I called Diane Rourke at 8:22 a.m. from the Sky Club. They're at the airport, I said. They just told me. I know, she said. Howard Kessler's office sent the final notice to their attorney's address at 8 o'clock this morning. Philip Branch should have it. I said, all right. Gerald, she said, you're sure? Yes, I said, I'm sure. She said, then we're done. It's filed. It's real. I looked out the window at the tarmac. A plane was pushing back from a gate in the early morning light. I drank my coffee. My parents' flight to Savannah landed at 9:34 a.m. By the time they reached baggage claim, Philip Branch had called my father's cell phone. By the time they reached their hotel on River Street, they had called me 6 times. I did not answer until the 7th call at 11:18 a.m. My mother's voice, when I picked up, was a sound I had not heard before, quiet in the wrong direction. "Gerald," she said, "what did you do?" I said, "I accounted for things, Mom." What I had done, in the legal and practical sense, was this. I had established a formal documented record of 31 years of financial contributions to my family: the roof, the cleaning service, the insurance supplement, and 6 other specific payments totaling just under $49,000 over 15 years, and filed that record with Fulton County as a basis for a formal reimbursement claim against the estate of Howard and Ruth Marsh, to be satisfied prior to any distribution of assets, including the house on Fenwick Road. Diane Rourke had structured it with precision. Howard Kessler had documented it with the thoroughness of a man who had spent 30 years doing this specific kind of work. It was not punitive. It was simply accurate. Philip Branch called me personally on the Monday after Savannah. He was a professional, and he spoke like one. "This is a well-constructed filing," he said. "I want you to know that." "Thank you," I said. "Your parents would like to discuss a resolution," he said. "They are not in a position to satisfy the claim in cash." "I know," I said. "Diane has a proposal." The proposal was straightforward. The claim would be settled by a revised distribution of the estate, one that restored equal standing to all 3 children, with specific acknowledgement of documented contributions. Dennis retained his share. He simply no longer retained all of it. The house on Fenwick Road, when the time eventually came, would be sold and divided 3 ways. That was the outcome. It took 4 weeks of negotiation and 1 meeting in Diane Rourke's conference room on Ponce de Leon Avenue, which I attended on a Tuesday morning in March of 2022, wearing a navy blazer Carol had picked out for me in 2015. My mother looked at me across the conference table and said, "Why didn't you just say something?" I thought about that for a moment. Outside the conference room window, Ponce de Leon Avenue was doing what it always did: cars and bikes, an occasional runner, everyone going somewhere. "You never asked what I had." I said. "You only ever asked what I needed." She looked at her hands. My father looked at the table. Diane Rourke's pen made a small sound on the paper. My parents returned to their ordinary lives on Fenwick Road with a cleaner sense of the ledger than they had possessed before. Dennis called me once in April, a short call, and said he understood. I believed him. We did not become closer, but we became clearer, which was perhaps what we had always needed more than closeness. Carolyn Marsh had known. She had known in October 2018, in the autumn of the last year she would have, and she had done the quiet thing she always did. She had made sure I was prepared. The cornerstone envelope, which I had opened in the Delta Sky Club at 8:11 a.m. on a Saturday in February, had contained more than financial documents. It had contained her understanding of who I was and what I was worth, written in 2 paragraphs in blue ink by someone who had never needed me to announce it: Gerald Marsh, 63 years old. And finally, in the plainest possible way, accounted for. The house on Arbor Glen Drive smells like lavender and old paper in the mornings. The fig tree Carol planted is going to need pruning again this spring. The cardinal still comes to the yard. I make coffee at 7:15 a.m. most days, and I sit at the kitchen table, and the neighborhood does what it does. The lawn mowers, the dogs, the refrigerator hum. That is the whole difference between building a life and waiting to be seen. Eventually, the numbers speak. They always speak. Some things don't need to be said. They just need to be filed. If you were sitting at that table in Diane Rourke's conference room on a Tuesday morning in March of 2022, watching your parents read a document that finally reflected everything you had given, what would you have said? Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. If you like this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of this sphere.